Good afternoon. On behalf of Paraclete Press, welcome to our virtual reading today of The Language of the Birds by Amy Nemecek. My name is Rachel McKendry. I'm the publicist here at Paraclete. Thank you so much for joining us today. A recording of today's reading will be available later on to share with anyone who couldn't join us or for you to be able to watch again. And we'll also be sure to let you know how you can get your own copies of The Language of the Birds and all of our Paraclete poetry collection. I'll just ask you to take a moment to find either the Q&A button or the chat bar, or if you're on Facebook Live, you can just enter any questions you might have for Amy there in the comments, and we'll hope to get to those by the end of our time together today. So just by way of introduction, Amy Nemecek was awarded the 2021 Paraclete Poetry Prize for The Language of the Birds, which is her first published collection. She lives in West Michigan with her husband, their adult son, and 2 cats, one of whom I believe will also be a guest at our reading today. When Amy isn't crafting words, she enjoys traveling to new places with her family and taking long walks in nature, both of which are reflected in her poems as well. I told Amy I just wanted to take a moment to read to you some of the really lovely things that people have said about her work in this collection in particular. Sharon Garlow Brown, who's the author of Sensible Shoes and the Shades of Light series, said, "Amy is well practiced in perceiving the goodness and glory of God in the midst of the ordinary and the extraordinary, in suffering and beauty, scarcity and abundance. In this exquisite collection of poems, Amy opens for us a portal and invites us to come and behold our own belovedness in the heart of God. Reading her work is an opportunity for worship." And then another quotation from Lucy Shaw, who's another Paraclete poet that we love so much. She says, "To hear the kind of music offered by nature's choristers amid an infinite world of competing voices, a listener needs a focus of intention and attention. This is the task of every poet, and this is Amy Nemecek's calling and vocation. In this brilliant transcription of responsive poems, we are reminded of the generous beauty offered us by our Creator. If we would only look and listen, if we would join in offering praise, read these lovely verses and give thanks." There are lots of other comments, but I just want to say, so thank you again for joining us. And indeed, let's take this time together as an opportunity for worship, as we are so blessed to hear Amy read her own words. And as she reads, let us listen and give thanks. So thank you so much, Amy, for reading for us today.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks so much for that kind introduction. And it's very gratifying, but also very humbling to hear these people that I admire, who I've admired for years, like Lucy Shaw, Sharon Brown, who is a very dear friend of mine, to hear their kind words. And I do hope that all of you out there, hello. And yes, my cat Lucy is on my lap. You might see a tail pop up. She might end up here. And I told Rachel earlier, we're just going to call her a very large furry bird, because she just will not, she will not leave my side today. But yeah, thank you all for taking time out of your day to just be here. And I hope find this a worshipful space, as Rachel said, and maybe hear some whisperings from God through my words. That's my prayer for you today. I've had people ask me how I came up with the title for my book. The Language of the Birds was not the original title for the manuscript I submitted. It wasn't my working title way back when I started compiling these poems. Actually, the last poem in the book, The Work of Our Hands, which I'll read later, that was originally going to be my title. But then this poem really means a lot to me. The Language of the Birds, I made it the very first poem in the book. And I think Catherine has a slide there. It was actually an ekphrastic poem that I wrote, a poem that came out of a piece of art. And it was a challenge that I took from an online challenge from a group that I followed. And the artwork you see here on the screen is actually the photo. It's the photo by Megan Merchant, and it's just called Shadow Play. But when I saw it, my eyes immediately saw paper and ink and creation. And so I wrote The Language of the Birds, and I will tell you that this is about the only poem I've ever written in one draft. And so it's very special to me. And so let me just read that for you now. The Language of the Birds. On the fifth day, your calloused fingers stretched out and plucked a single reed from the river that flowed out of Eden, trimmed its hollow shaft to length, and whittled one end to a precise V that you dipped in the inkwell of ocean. Touching pulpy nib to papyrus sky, you brushed a single hieroglyph, feathered the vertical downstroke, flourished with serif opinions, a perpendicular crossbar lifting weightless bones from left to right. Tucking the stylus behind your ear, you blew across the wet silhouette, dried a raven's wings against the static, and spoke aloud the symbol's sounds. Fly. When I saw the image of that raven against the gray, I thought of day 5 of creation when God created the flying things. And I thought of him as the author of language, both spoken language and written language. And I thought of him tracing this letter on the sky and then speaking it into existence. And it was just such a special image for me when I saw it. And I'm so grateful for that. So that's how I got the title for my book. I chose one of my favorites. And I just want to give a shout out to Paraclete Press because the cover of this book is amazing. I remember when Rachel emailed me the cover, and she said, here's a cover design, and we hope you love it as much as we do. And I opened the file, and I was blown away. I'm like, it's exactly what I would have wanted. So thank you to the design team there, and just well done. I'm in love with it. I'm going to read another poem. I'm a Michigan girl. I have lived in Michigan my whole life. And if you've ever been to Michigan, you'll know we have these things called Petoskey stones. There's a city called Petoskey along the lake shore and up north. And I love Petoskey stones. I have jars of them around my house that I've collected over the years. As I walk the beaches, or when we lived north of here, they were in the road. I'd find them in the road gravel when I'd walk on our country roads. So here they are in this picture, nicely polished up so you can see them. But when you find them along the lakeshore, they're really just little lumps of gray rock. And you don't always see the pattern until you get them wet. But I wrote this poem about my favorite Michigan stone. And you'll also notice Lucy Shaw writes about Petoskey stones as well. And it's one of my favorites too, the polishing the Petoskey stone. Here's my poem, Petoskey Stones. If you go too fast, you'll miss hexagonal supernovas staring up at you from the beach. But if you walk slowly, you'll bow often to pluck ordinary rocks from wet sand's gray obscurity. Rinse them clear in turquoise shallows. Lock eyes with cherubim that lift your gaze further down, deeper in, to where wheels within wheels of fossilized coral swirl in the palm of your hand, flinging ancient sunbursts across the waves, to the four corners of this mighty inland sea. Those stones are fossilized coral, and apparently long, long ago, beginning of time, Lake Michigan had coral and all sorts of other life in it that we now just see in our oceans. But I was just out at the lake last week, and it is a gem. I absolutely love Lake Michigan. And so it factors into a number of my poems. Okay, I'm going to move ahead to this first part of the book. The book is broken into three parts. They're not titled. It's just 1, 2, and 3. The first part that I've been reading from so far, these are more poems about perhaps scripture stories that I reimagine, maybe things that I find interesting, like Petoskey stones, but that I see the creator in those objects. And so that's the first part of the book. I'm going to read a poem called Pentecost next. I wrote this a number of years ago on Pentecost Sunday, and I think it speaks for itself. I don't think I need to give any other introduction. Pentecost. On this 50th day since Easter, we expected fire. We got snow. We expected winter's grip to loose long before our mid-May celebrations. But grapple bounces like live coals on the deck and begins to blanket the yard I've mowed twice already. I don't want to preach like Peter or speak in tongues of men and angels. Only let me listen as ice-hot wind batters my heart inside out. Let spirit-blown flakes kiss my forehead, sear my tongue, cauterize my words with frigid heat. Mute the babble of voices into white noise until all I sense is the breath of the Comforter's coming. It was Pentecost Sunday. It was May. We lived kind of, so a Michigan girl, I carry my map with me. So I live here down in West Michigan, but we lived way up here at the time. And we did have snow on Pentecost Sunday, very unexpectedly. And so that was what prompted me to write that poem. Earlier today, I noticed Catherine posted on the Paraclete website. I'm going to throw this one in there, Rachel, because Catherine shared it on the website, my poem Rooster Crow. And this one is about Peter and imagining his feelings after his denial of Christ on Maundy Thursday and Good Friday. Rooster Crow. Tradition tells us, Peter, that after one night's disavowal, you never heard morning's call without mourning. At Rooster Crow, you went out and wept bitterly, and its sound forever triggered startled sobs, like waking from dreams of falling. Yet I wonder, the prisms that glisten on your eyelids now, far away failures refracted in roomy lens, whether these are laments of gratitude, of bitter joy, that despite denial, his mercies are new every morning. Embrace then this alarum, this waking to his great faithfulness. I attended a conference last fall out in Holland, Michigan. It was put on by the Eugene Peterson Center for Christian Imagination. at Western Seminary at Hope College, out by Hope College, I should say. They are not conjoined. But one of the speakers, Drew Jackson, he's a poet. Actually, Drew's book just came out, his second book of poetry, Touch the Earth, Poems on the Way. And he is a fantastic poet. I can't wait to dig into that. I literally just got that book yesterday. But Drew made an interesting comment. He said that at the end of every poem is the invisible line, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. I hope that that is at the end of each of my poems when I write. And it's interesting because the next poem I want to read, I've titled Revelation 2:17. And Revelation 2:17 starts out, whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says. To the one who overcomes, I will give a white stone with a new name written on it, known only to the one who receives it. And I love that idea that there's this new name that Jesus will give me someday. He'll hand it to me on a stone. And it's known only to me and Jesus, I think. Revelation 2:17. What if the new name you give me on that day is just an old name I've carried in my pocket? A talisman fingered smooth, like the Tchaikovsky waltz on repeat in my mind's ear. It's lilting 5/4, keeping tempo with the waves. What if the white stone you hand me is familiar, so that simply hearing you whisper, beloved, makes it ever new? For those of you who know me, you may have heard me say that my name, Amy, means beloved. And it's the reason my parents gave me that name. They gave it to me as a reminder who I am. And as I have grown older, I have been learning to better appreciate that belovedness in Christ. It's not for anything I do. It's just he loves us for who we are. And so learning to embrace that has been very meaningful for me these past several years, especially. And it's been interesting to explore that through poems and see how that comes out. The second part of my book, look at this beautiful image that they put there. The second part are themes from nature. These are a lot of lyric poems that are based in nature. Right now, we're in January, almost February here in Michigan, and it is gray, my friends. If you don't live in Michigan, the lake makes it very gray here on this western shore. If there's any friends from Wisconsin, please send some sunshine. I know you get more over there. But go ahead and put this next slide up, Catherine, please. My poem, Like Eating a Plum, has to do with this time of year when it's very gray. And I just want to, by way of explaining, I want to, there's a lot in this poem. It is one of my favorites. First of all, the phrase like eating a plum. My mother used to say that. We would visit her mother, my grandmother, out in Paterson, New Jersey. And we would go for about a week, and I was her traveling companion. And whenever we would leave, it was really hard for my mom to leave New Jersey and come back to Michigan, because my grandmother was old and we just never knew, when would be the last time we saw her. And every time on our last day there visiting her, she would say, "The time went too fast, Ma. It was like eating a plum." Just like eating a plum. And so that's where the title comes from. But this poem is also a riff on a William Carlos Williams poem that goes like this. He wrote, "This is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet, and so cold." So when I read this headline in our local paper, the Grand Rapids Press, back in January 2017, it said Michiganders have barely seen the sun since December. And from December 1 to the date of that headline, January 30th, we had had exactly 19 minutes of sunshine. 19 minutes. So here are my thoughts on that. Like eating a plum. When sunshine is measured in minutes, not hours or days, you have to pluck it as soon as it's ripe. Open the door to an icebox yard, snatch light from a blue sky bowl, sink teeth into the pulpy golden orb, turning white snow dazzling. Slurp, suck, savor every delicious ray, so sweet and so cold. Spit the pale bare stone behind another round of gray. It is very gray here today. It is snowing here today. So I am definitely looking forward to warmer, brighter weeks ahead once we reach, hopefully, March. But I'm going to read one of my summer poems. It's very short, it's just 8 lines. I do not like to pull, I like to garden, but I do not like to pull weeds. I feel like I've been pulling weeds since I was a child, when my father would send me and my sister Jane down to the garden in the summer and say, "Go weed the beans, go weed the garden." And so this is my poem called Weeds. I rip them out, roots and all, every chance I get, seldom thinking of their names. And yet there's music in a sobriquet like trefoil, chicory, heel all, mullein. Adam delighted in naming animals, insects, flowers, Eve. But when it came to naming weeds, each syllable stung like nettles. Knowing sorrel, purslane, thistle seeds would infiltrate Eden's bowers. It is nice to think of summer, though. I would even be content to go out and pull weeds if I could have just a little slim glimpse of sunshine. Here's another summer poem, and it's called How Much Blue? I just need to find it. One thing that poetry I find does for me, poetry creates space, takes like this moment in time, and it's like a, think of an hourglass and the sand falling through it, and it's like it turns the hourglass on its side, so the sand stops just in that moment, and it allows us just to be present. And in that space, in that presence, we can often hear the voice of God if we have the ears to listen, right? So this poem, How Much Blue, I wrote it on the banks of Lake Cadillac. My son and I had gone up there to the little pavilion to hear a jazz ensemble play. on a summer evening. And then I wrote this. How much blue? Velvet jazz drifts across the lake from where an ensemble plays at the pavilion. Trumpet crooning, how much blue can summer hold? Dad's Ferguson tractor sits idle in the field. Its cadet blue paint, powdery from hours in the sun. Dresses, towels, dungarees flap against cerulean sky. Blue on blue on blue to match the heron that fishes in the neighbor's pond. Chicory grows in periwinkle canyons along this country road. Skippers, sulfurs, and brushfoots flit among bachelor's button. Jays scold from turquoise dusted spruce boughs. We drive to the blueberry patch and fill buckets. I love rolling their tartness around on my tongue as I sit on the deck, a book of Mary Oliver's poems open on my lap, its pages stained with dust. An azure dragonfly alights on the railing. So close, I could stroke its slender thorax. Barn swallows and martins wing to roosts. Procyon winks in twilight indigo. More than enough. It was fun to look around my world and find as many things as I could that were blue. All the different shades of blue was a fun exercise, and I really enjoyed writing that poem. My favorite time of year, as anyone who knows me will tell you, is autumn. I love the vibrant colors of the leaves, and I love the melancholy of fall. It's a very short-lived season, and I try to, as my poem said, slurp, suck, and savor every moment of autumn. So I'm going to read a couple of my autumn poems. Turn to those here. Sorry for the delay. I did not flag them. Here we go. Okay, I'm going to read a poem called Streets of Gold. And I don't know if my friend Angie is watching me, but a couple days after my book released, back in October, early November, my friend called me from Colorado, and she wanted to tell me in person, not in an email or a text, but wanted me to hear her say that in reading this poem, she said, I experienced God's presence. God was present to me through your words. And that meant the world to me to hear her speak those words of affirmation over me. And she just was able to visualize living in Colorado. Obviously, there are aspen trees everywhere. Where I lived north of here, there were a lot of aspen trees also. And so it was easy for her to visualize that. And so this poem is called Streets of Gold. And there's an epigraph from John Donne. In heaven, it is always autumn. His mercies are ever in their maturity. Who says the golden paths we'll walk are paved with cold, hard ingots? My feet fly over a roadbed of coins that flutter from aspens in perfectly heart-shaped currency. For all the leaves descending, the wealth does not deplete. Branches are never cold and bare, but always warm and glowing, like flames on an autumn hearth. I remember being out under those gold aspens one day and thinking, I hope this is what heaven's like. And that's when I wrote that poem. There's another poem I love, also an autumn poem. And Catherine, if you could put up the, I'm going to read this one. I'm doing them out of order. Sorry about that. Larch song. So a larch tree is also known as a tamarack tree. And they are first of all, they're coniferous, which usually evergreens don't turn colors and lose their needles. But the large trees are the last to turn color. They are a coniferous tree, and they turn yellow and they lose their needles, which is kind of a very interesting paradox, I think. But they are beautiful. And so I wrote this poem. As we would drive along the main road in our little rural community, there was this stand of larches right along the road. And just when all the colors were done and like, oh no, we're going into winter, they would turn bright yellow. And it was like it all started over again. And those trees are what inspired me to write this. Larch song. Just when I think it's over, when October rains silence autumn's symphony and mute the forest brown, tamarack voices crescendo in coniferous plain chant of yellow needles. Their Dorian modality rising to golden fortissimo along November roads before snow cues a deciduous diminuendo that drones sepia sotto voce. You'll notice I used a lot of music words in there. Diminuendo, crescendo, sotto voce, those are all musical notations. And I love music. I studied music in college, got a music degree. And so a lot of musical terms come into my poetry. I often will tell one of my music teachers who I have stayed connected with through the years, I'll say, in teaching me music, you taught me so much more than music. You taught me rhythm. You taught me how sounds go together. And I really think that that has influenced me as a poet as well. I'm going to read a poem I haven't actually read at any of my other events that I've done. This poem is really interesting because I worked on it a lot actually with both workshopping it in a group. And then even after Paraclete accepted my manuscript, awarded me the prize in 2021, in working with my editor, this was a sticky poem. It just wasn't landing right. Excuse me. And I ended up, when we were editing, I didn't know what to do, but I didn't want to pull the poem from the collection. So what I did was I completely tore it down and started from scratch and rewrote it. And I sent it to my editor. And she said, well, yes, that's the way it should be. So thank you to my editor for helping me to see that it still needed work. And the poem is called, depending on how you pronounce it, it's called Acedia, or as my Greek scholar friend tells me, it's pronounced Acadia. When aspen leaves turn gold, you ride in on a whirlwind to a diner called Nowhere. Snap down your kickstand, sling helmet over handlebars. You side hug me and grin as we enter this small town cafe and claim a glitter red booth. It's vinyl tacky with duct tape. I feed the jukebox quarters and select the Beach Boys, then slide across from you. We split an order of onion rings, reminisce between bites of burgers, cry over a spilled milkshake. I feel so broke up. I want to go home. I'm about to say how God only knows what I'd be without you. When the needle sticks on Sloop John B.'s bridge, and you pick up the check and aim for the door. My pilgrim heart remains, stirring questions and single-serve creamers into my coffee as I watch you straddle your B-twin cherubim, ignite them with a roar, then twist the throttle until the road rises up between you and me, and my longing for more. I wrote that at a time when I felt exiled and lonely, and I imagined God meeting me for a burger and a milkshake at the little local diner in the town where my husband and I were serving a church at the time. And yeah, I was asking God a lot of questions, and there was a deep longing in my heart for home. So I hope that poem landed well. Again, I said that, like I said, that was the first time I've ever read it in public. I'm going to move to the book's third section here and read a few poems. Again, look at these beautiful illustrations that they did on the part openers. This last section of the book is story-based narrative poems, and a lot of them are very personal, from my own personal life, from my family history, both my growing up family, and so I just want to read a couple of those. I'm reminded of a quote by Robert Frost, who said, "Poetry is a way of remembering what it would impoverish us to forget." And so a lot of times when I write poetry, it's so I don't forget, whether I don't forget a family story or whether I don't forget God's goodness to me. So I'm going to start with a poem called Mechanics. And if my friend Nellie is watching, she's in my poetry group. When I did a live event here in Grand Rapids, where we both live, I did not read Mechanics. And so I thought I need to read this one for Nellie, because she's like, I wish you had read it. Let me preface this by saying I work as a book editor for Baker Publishing Group. And so that gives a little bit of context for this. And also my dad was a mechanic. He worked on cars. Mechanics. Dad never wanted his daughter's hands to get dirty. Still, he welcomed my presence each day after school. And during the long days of summer vacation, he kept me busy stacking oil cans, sorting parts, returning tools to the board, sweeping floors, counting coins in his desk. Along the way, I watched and learned, though not what you might think. Now I fix books the way Dad fixed cars. My wrench is a red pencil that I use to install brakes in run-on sentences, enrich the two-lean mixture of fragments, insert commas so each sentence shifts smoothly. I open the cover to look under the hood, check the dipstick line by line, kick the margins for proper inflation. Sometimes it just needs a tune-up. Transpose crossed letters so they fire in order, dot the I's and cross the T's for plenty of spark, tweak the compound, complex timing of sentences. Other times, the engine is seized and a complete overhaul is in order. That's when I pull whole paragraphs or chapters, tear down and rebuild the transmission of ideas. Dad didn't understand that ink is just a different kind of grease. And his girl's fingers are filthy. I had so much fun writing that poem. Yeah, I love that one. And I love to think of my dad. And yeah, I do try to have fun when I write. Some of my poems in this book are very reflective and come out of a place of deep pain. Some of them are just out of a place of curiosity. And one day I was wondering, how did we get ampersands? I was actually going through a manuscript, removing all the ampersands because we spell out and in our house style for work. And so I thought, where did this funny little piece of punctuation come from? So Catherine, if you want to go ahead and put that ampersand up on, yeah. And I actually sent this in to a contest in Traverse City. The Traverse District Library would do a Poets Night Out contest every year, and this was one of the winners. So yeah, here we go. And you might learn a little something about how we got ampersands. 9 months pregnant with possibility, you arch your conjunctive back, serifs supporting weary obliques to bear weight of more, plus, in addition, etc. Once part of every student's recitation, W, X, Y, Z, and per se and, you're long since the odd letter out, reduced to occasional symbol, less than punctuation. You sit in elliptical contemplation, rounded bottom seated on baseline, arms hugging shins to chest, forehead leaned prayerfully on bony kneecaps, as you ponder tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And yes, that was a little nod to Shakespeare in there as well. It's Macbeth. Here's a poem about my son, my husband and I. My husband is Sean, and we have one son. His name's Ben. He is an adult now. But when I wrote this, he was, I don't know, maybe 10, 11. And it's interesting because, you know, when you have your first child, the exhaustion of infancy, right? And so it's like you hardly see each other because one or the other of you is always doing something with the baby. And then they hit this stage where they go to bed and you've got like 3 hours to watch TV or do whatever. And then they hit a little later stage and they need you to run them here, there, and everywhere. But for us, being a family of 3, it was an interesting challenge to work that out. So I wrote this poem called 3-2 Time. And it's a little bit about Ben. When I played piano as a child, my hands struggled to cooperate, and never more than when the left played triplets, the right played 8s, my teacher counting 1 lolly, 2 lolly, 1 and 2 and, patient cues to play 3/2. Now that I'm a mother, I struggle to coordinate the duple of us with the triple of we. Knowing someday soon, son, you'll go solo, and once more these fingers will fumble 2 notes per beat. Then we'll long for the counterpoint fugue you bring to every bar and phrase. And yes, as he has become an adult and is doing more things without us, we do sometimes long for that. And yet then we could go out, just the 2 of us, for supper last night. So that's fun too. I see it's about 1:45, Rachel. I have one more poem, but let's hold it till the end after questions. Yeah. Does that sound okay?
That sounds wonderful.
Okay.
So, Amy, I don't know if you can see them, but so many lovely comments have been coming in here in the chat bar.
Oh, wow.
Nellie, who you said is a member of your group, I
She
believe,
is.
been faithfully commenting here. Thank you, Nellie.
Thank you.
Renee agreed with you about the cover. Thank you. Yes, thanks
Oh,
to our
hi,
design.
Renee.
They really work to capture the heart of every book. So I'm so glad that that worked for your comments. Let's see. Yes, comments on Michigan. Love your snowy Pentecost, says James. And yes, a few people about that thought that at the end of every poem, whoever has ears to hear, let them hear. Too. Felinda Geerling says, "Hi, Amy. It's been a very long time since we worked."
It's been a long time.
So glad we're connected through Facebook. Thoroughly enjoying your poems.
Oh, thank you, Felinda.
And Lori Klein, another poet, it mentions, delightful to hear the real life on ramps to your work, Amy. Added
Thank
pleasure to the poems and your reading of them. I agree. I love that. One of my favorite things about these readings together is to really hear what's behind these words, because for myself, I know, ooh, that captures me. I wonder what else was there. So it feels like such
Yeah.
a privilege to hear you talk about them to us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Let's see.
I wanted to give a shout out too, because my book was not the solo winner of the Paraclete Prize in 2021. And I just got my copy of Holy Land by Angela O'Donnell. And it's amazing. If any of you were able to hear her read last fall, right? It was in November.
Yeah, it was.
Just brilliant. So take advantage of that discount code that Rachel sent out in the email, and you can snag a lot of great poetry that way.
So many, it's true. So many more comments. Thank you to everyone. And Amy, I'll be sure to send these to you so you can really read them all.
Thank you. Yeah.
Now here's a comment from Renee Emerson, who says, "Hi, I'm watching with my 4 daughters. You are our homeschool English class today."
Yes.
And that so warms my heart. And here at Paraclete, you know, poetry is a mission of ours. We feel very strongly that poetry is near to the heart of God. And it's so gratifying lately to see and hear so many people talking about poetry as a real vehicle for devotion, worship, liturgy, conversation with God. And, you know, for those of us who homeschool our kids, especially, and choose what they're reading, such a valuable tool for that. And I wondered if that's something you might want to speak to, Amy, of what you've discovered or how you see it.
Yeah. So actually, I homeschooled our son as well. And also I want to give a shout out because Renee Emerson is an amazing poet too. So make sure to check out her work. But yeah, I just find that God shows up in the most unexpected places for me. And it's often through poetry, whether it's when I'm, unraveling a line of my own or when I'm reading someone else's, that draws me into worship. But it's healing for me, for one thing. I think I mentioned earlier that, what did Robert Frost say? It helps us remember what it would impoverish us to forget. So, God's been so good in my life. There's been hard things, like we all have hard things in our lives. But then when I start to unravel those things through words and remember and reflect, then I realize just how very good he is. And that opens this space in my soul just to give thanks. But it also opens space for me to lament. There's some pretty heavy lament poems in especially part 3 of my book. And I'm a cancer survivor. And so, some of the poems come out of that experience. And, I'm not going to read it now, but if you want to read one of them, Survivor Guilt is a lament poem, lamenting people that I knew who didn't make it. My mother being one of them. So yeah, and we need that space for both the joy and for the lament, for the light and the shadow, right? The other thing it does for me is I've been learning a lot about the Enneagram, and I'm a 1. And ones, it's really easy for me as a 1 to see everything that's wrong. Everything. That's why I'm an editor, right? I can spot the mistakes. So yeah, for me as a 1, one of the ways that I can counter that, because it unsettled me. Like there's always something that I see that could be better or is wrong. So taking time to be in nature, for one thing, helps me see all that's right. You know, nature doesn't need any improvement. God did a fantastic job. And then writing about it helps me to see and reflect on it. But also when I read someone else's poem, and I have this with Lucy Shaw's poems, especially, when I read it, I'm like, yes, it's exactly right. There's not a word out of place. And it's just this satisfying feeling of God's in his heaven and all's right with the world. And that draws me into his presence and relationship with him. So, I don't know, did that answer the question?
Yeah. I think
Okay,
so.
maybe
then-
more than
and you know, at Paraclete, most all of our poetry really does have that spiritual bent, but I sometimes think with poets, they can't help it. Even the ones
Yeah.
who might not know exactly what they're connecting with, there's that divine spark that, whether it's because of a question or pain, like
Yeah.
you said, or joy, whatever it is. And so such fantastic tools to use
Yes,
different places.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Um, you know, when you were reading the poem Rooster,
Rooster Crow, yeah. Yeah.
and I think it was right before you started reading that, I started to write down a question about when you're writing poetry, do you have an audience in mind? And I don't necessarily mean an audience like a group of people that you're reading,
Right.
but then I think it was close to that time when you said about that implication, whoever has ears to hear,
Oh yeah.
let them hear. And I thought, I wondered with poets, if you always write with the thought or intention that someday someone's going to read this, or if there's a time when it turns from being for you to being for someone else, or when it stays just
Right.
for you.
That's a really good question. Um, I think I probably started out writing just for myself. In fact, I know I started out, I've been writing poetry since about 3rd grade. And once I got a poem in the school newsletter, it was like, yeah, hit me with more of that, right? But I really kind of came into my own when I was in college after I had lost my mom and started processing that through poetry, and just realized what a vessel that is. So I started writing for myself. And then when other people read it, in fact, just yesterday, I watched a webinar with Ada Limon, the poet laureate for the US, and she talked about how it means so much when people say to her, like, I get that. I understand because I've been there. It just meant so much to me. I inhabited that poem. Even though it wasn't my own experience, I was able to inhabit that. And so, yeah, I think we turn to writing for others. And I think as disciples of Jesus, that's what we should do, because he calls us to do that. And so I think that poetry can be a vessel for discipleship, an avenue for that. So
Thank
I
you.
see a question from
Yes.
Susan. Do I write poems about my cat?
Mhm.
I don't. I haven't, but maybe I should. Yeah, I have not written a poem about Lucy, or we have another cat who's very shy, and her name is Cassie, but she would not make an appearance. So, but no, I have not. I have not. That's a great question, though, Susan. Thank you.
Amy, you talked a little bit about this, but Nellie is asking again how you would summarize the third section of your book.
Yeah. I mean, I think I mentioned how it's mostly narrative poems. So they're poems that tell a story. I think it would be, if I had to summarize it, it would be to say that when I first, it carries you through from when I first came to know God. With the first poem in that section is called Ecclesiology 101, and it's about sitting in church when I'm a kid growing up. And so just my very first earliest memories of who God is and how all these ups and downs and these different people from my life have continued to make him real to me and live out what they believe. So, and have enabled me to make it my own as well. I think that's how I would summarize it. A little overview of Amy's life.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned there was one more that you wanted to read.
I do, yeah. I'm going to read the last poem in the collection. It's called The Work of Our Hands. And a little intro to this is that my husband, Sean, loves to work with wood as a hobby. And so you'll see in the background here, there's a vase he turned up on the shelf, and there's a bowl he turned. He had a lathe, and he loved to shape wood, right? And so where we used to live, his wood shop was in the basement, and it was directly below the desk where I would work at our front window. And so when he'd fire up the lathe, I would feel it in my feet and I would hear it, right? But so one night I was working and just thinking about that, and I wrote this, and the epigraph to it is from Psalm 90, where Moses prays, "Establish the work of our hands for us." Yes, establish the work of our hands. And so it's, in a way, this is a prayer. We create alone, together. You below stairs, I above. Your saw and plane and lathe hum steady tempos to my scratching pen and clicking keyboard. Your hands grip tools that block, gouge, hone, smooth rough wood into bowls, platters, cups, pens. Shavings of maple, walnut, cherry, and oak curl to the floor until desired dimensions remain. My hand grips pen to block, gouge, hone, smooth rough words into sentences, paragraphs, images, and moods. Shavings of adverbs, articles, nouns, verbs curl to the page until imagined ideas remain. Geometries echo in my ink. Metaphors echo in your wood. We work over, under, in wonder, each of us imaging the image of one who crafted our callings. Let his pleasure be upon us. And that's my prayer for all of you, that you will feel God's pleasure today in whatever you do, working or playing, just going about your everyday, ordinary lives.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who's joined us. This has been such a wonderful hour. It feels like a mini retreat in the middle of the day.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Just what we all needed.
A little oasis on a very wintry day. So.
Absolutely, absolutely. I promised I'd tell you that the language of the birds and all of our Paraclete poetry books are available hopefully through your own local bookseller. We always encourage you to go to your local bookseller first. Of course, through paracletepress.com, as Catherine, I think, posted at the beginning of this time today, we have a fantastic opportunity right now. If you want to purchase through our website, there's a 30% discount on Amy's book and our other poetry. Amy mentioned, yes, Angela's Holy Land and
Yeah.
Lucy Shaw and Jill Baumgartner's here. We have some
Yeah.
of her poetry, Marjorie Maddox, and others too. So
And Marjorie.
this is a nice chance to fill up your shelves with some truly beautiful words that we are privileged to carry. So thank you to all of you. And again, this poetry can be such a great tool for study together. People have used poetry like Amy's as even companions to Bible study, devotional study. Lent is coming up, and I think more and more I keep thinking, wow, what better way to spend some devotional time during Lent than with poetry that really asks you to stop and listen and pay attention, as you say so beautifully, Amy, in so many of your poems. I wrote it down for myself: walk slowly, bow often, pay attention. And those are
Yeah.
great
Those
principles.
words are actually the walk slowly, bow often. That's from a Mary Oliver poem. And so I can't take complete credit for those words, but I need to give her props. So, but yeah, that's what we should all be aiming for.
Absolutely. So thank you for reminding us of that. Again, thank you to all of you for joining us today. Our prayers are with everyone across the country, as we are for health and safety and for special blessings during this time. And we hope you'll join us again. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Rachel. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.